Hello and welcome to the Modern Fairy Sightings Podcast, where we listen to people's fairy encounters. But take heed, we're not talking about winged Tinkerbells here. These are real fairies, real encounters that took people like you and I by surprise. Stay a while and hear their stories. My name is Jo Hickey Hall, and I'm a folklore researcher. Dear listener, how are you? I am recording this on the 6th of April, which is a full moon in Libra. There's lots of change afoot, and we can certainly feel it in the highly charged air. With all these shifts happening, I'm noticing that many folks are having injuries and accidents at the moment. It seems to be happening a lot. I just have this theory that with all the transitions happening in the atmosphere, of which we are a part of course, we're raising our vibrations away from the more dense material plane and towards the more etheric aspects of our human existence. So could the physical injuries be caused by tensions experienced as a result of these shifts? The other thing I've noticed lately is so many instances of déjà vu. So many that I've noticed are tying into dreams that I had at the beginning of lockdown. It's almost as if something within me is tying these 2 points of time together as a matter of importance. I'd love to hear from you if you have your own theories of what's going on. As always, I come away feeling a lot better after I've watched Pam Gregory Astrologer. Her videos on YouTube are terrific, and I highly recommend them if you're seeking understanding. So this is, of course, the second part of the London Goblins encounter. Both my guest and I have been overwhelmed at the response to the first episode. One listener even produced some artwork. After listening to the show, artist Jonathan Dodd posted a likeness of the goblins, which he has allowed me to include on the show notes. The guest felt it was similar to the beings that she saw, only the goblins were much scarier looking in real life, and one goblin was on the other's shoulders, as she described. In this second part, our guest talks about what was going on in her life at the time of the encounter, and the sense of trauma that these extraordinary experiences can leave you with. We also discuss her childhood and the kinds of home environment, family traditions and beliefs that can encourage children's imagination to foster a sense of limitless possibility which can continue into adulthood. Join us on Patreon for further reflections from our guest and to join upcoming events, but most of all to join our warm, supportive community of like-minded folk and exchange ideas. In doing so, for just £3 a month, you are supporting the podcast too. Thank you so much to all the amazing members of the Curious Crew on Patreon for their continued patronage, love and engagement. Our Zoom chats just keep getting better and better every time, and I feel very lucky to be able to hang out and discuss things openly in the way that we do. Enjoy the episode, and I'll be back at the end for a quick chat. Time to You mentioned in your childhood that there were a few experiences. What did those consist of? And by the way, I just wanted to say that I think it's lovely that your mum had said, you're going off to play, and there might be fairies. Because the thing is, as you say, well, it was all just fantasy. Yeah, as children we play and we allow ourselves to be open to the possibility. And this is everything. Being open to the possibility is so powerful. And yes, it's about just exploring the world as children. And, no, we're not, when we say that to our kids, we're not expecting them to then go and have an experience necessarily. Of course not. But just instilling that idea of magic in your children and being open to the possibility and allowing that in them, and then not shutting it down as well, is just so important, because then we grow as adults and we hopefully are some part of us at least is open to that possibility. And even if we go and live in a big city like London or Bristol, and we, have really sensible jobs, and, we have our own kids, and we have all these grown-up stuff we need to do, and of course the pressures of life are extreme and ever more so as we go forward. But, if we can have and hold on to that little part of us that is open to that possibility, then that's when not just experiences like this happen, but you might think, oh, well, I quite like to go and study this. Well, why not? Let's look into it. And this is where we have to be open, because it's the flow of life, isn't it? And so often we'll think, oh, well, I can't do this, or I can't talk about that. And it's just a pipe dream to think I could imagine doing this with my life. This is, if we can just have that little bit of a crack of possibility, then we remove our limits, and we can just kind of creep towards these ideas and these aspects of our life that we would like to grow. So I just wanted to say that, because it's really wonderful, and I just wish that, because we do have some amazing teachers. I know some amazing teachers who have instilled this in the children in their classrooms, and I really hope that we never lose that.
Yes, I was very lucky growing up in the countryside, because this was sort of a normal thing. And I remember even this Christmas, actually, which was lovely. My mum they had an open fire at my parents' place, and my mum said to me, out of nowhere, they were putting logs of crates. The coal came in on the fire. And it was probably Christmas Eve or something like that. She said, when I was a little girl, my grandfather used to watch the fire with me. And I shot her a look, and I was like, oh, that's nice, Mum. And she said, yes, he used to tell me that the blue flames were fairies. And as she said this, there were 2 or 3 little blue flickering flames, and they looked like fairies. And we both saw them at the same time. It was lovely. And they were just flames. It must be to do with the chemical changes in the wood. But I thought, or was it? Exactly. I thought, and it happened again the following night. And I was like, oh, wow, what a lovely thing to experience. And I think, growing up, I was very lucky. Well, I say that in some ways. I mean, my family is half Welsh. I'm Welsh, sorry, half Welsh on one side. And my grandmother had a crystal ball. Great grandmother, and they were very much into the spiritualist world, because that was part of what they did, the culture at that point, reading tea leaves, palm reading, you name it, they did it. And I mean, I was aware of this, but not sort of super aware. And I think that kind of heightened sort of intuitive awareness comes through very much Welsh people. It's part of who we are and how we communicate, and we probably do it without realizing we're doing it as well. But I mean, as a little girl, I remember apparently I told my mum that a grey lady walked through the wall when I was about 3 and spoke to me. Again, it was a ground floor building, and she still won't tell me what this person said, because she said it would frighten me. Now, whether that's her version of not wanting to deal with it, and I had thought recently I really need to find out what this person said. Yeah. But the house I grew up in was definitely haunted. And all of us experienced stuff. Every single one of us experienced stuff in there. But I remember as a little girl in the bedroom I was in, seeing little light energy orbs in there. My sister saw them as well years later, but in a different part of this room. And I remember hiding under the blankets and stuff when I was very little, because I didn't like the presence of what was in that room. And I was so scared. I was about 3. Didn't see anything more than that. We all had kind of doppelganger type experiences where, one person will be downstairs talking to someone, and then you go upstairs and they're there. That type of experience happened a lot. Oh gosh, all sorts of stuff happened in that house. It was very, very old. It was not 16th century, but not far off. Wow. Yeah, and as a quite a young age, my parents were aware that I would walk into a room and tell them, in my own little way, whether I thought it was haunted or not. My dad used to take me around. He was selling houses and stuff. And he used to take me around and to ask me to tell him if I thought it was haunted. Yeah, really? I was only 10.
I totally, we actually had the same in my family. My sister
Oh,
was the same. My dad, he was a builder, so he would, and they were, looking to buy a new property,
oh my
and
goodness.
they would take my sister, and my
Yes.
sister would be like, "No, not going in there," so they wouldn't buy the house.
Yeah,
She's
that's what happened with
so
me.
psychic.
That's my dad. My parents said many a house would we have bought, but for the fact that you walked in and walked straight out again,
Yeah,
or had
brilliant.
but that I really hats off to them for letting me do that, because
Yeah,
that's because I tuned into myself.
yeah, yeah,
Had so many of these sort of, I mean, obviously, growing up and being in the arty world back in what was the 80s, it was pre-internet. So anybody who was, I had my own little cauldron at home when I was little. I'd make my own potions, but this was all not fantasy, but it was probably coming from somewhere. But
yeah.
it was, my mum said to me the other day, why did you buy a cauldron? I said, I don't know. But I was looking for it the other day. It's only tiny, it's a little brass thing with a lid, but it was
Yeah.
it was either DNA, genetics. I don't know. I mean, any of those things that we can put explanations on. But I was lucky in that respect, because I don't think I've lost that part of the wonderment and loving those sort of magical moments.
Mm.
But I genuinely think as time went on, I kind of not quashed it, but it would frighten people. I've definitely scared people, not intentionally, but other people haven't dealt with their own issues. So I'm so sort of out there with it that sometimes I think it scares people.
Mm.
And maybe over time, I've probably learned to filter and leave chunks out of conversation because it's not socially acceptable.
Yeah.
And that's the sadness. And people have said to me, oh, gosh, we're still in that world where if you mention certain things, people want to either shut you down or change the subject. Sort of some things that would have happened along the way to me would probably give people a nervous breakdown. They wouldn't know how to handle it. And I do think that, the sort of the fairy folk and the fae world, it has been portrayed as being cute in the fantasy and Disney, and it's even opening up the world to the djinn, which I knew nothing about. I've been exploring about that. That's fascinating, but also a whole different layer. It's a whole system of culture that I thought as kind of I should know about it, but it's massive. Mm-hmm. And so as a child, yes, I was open to finding out. And I probably explored more than most children would. I did the whole ghosty thing with a torch and running around scary buildings at night and looking for stuff and, hanging around. I sound like a complete freak, but hanging around in the moonlight and, looking for, oh yeah, I did all of that. I did all of that. And I sort of like roll it off the bat now. People look at me and go, oh my goodness, we've got a real one here. But, that type of world I'm very used to. I can kind of figure stuff out quite quickly if there's a presence near or if I'm in danger or any of the above. And I kind of felt that with that house. When you're in, say if you're in a kitchen and something suddenly catches light, like a saucepan's on fire, and there's a sort of, it's not big enough to burn the house down, but it's enough for you to go, oh my goodness, I've got to put it out. It felt like that every day in that building.
Yeah.
And that's what was so, when I say heightened awareness, it was an awareness of another dimension or something else going on that needed my attention or was trying to catch my attention.
Yeah. What do you think was the meaning behind it?
That's a good one.
It sounds, let's just ask that first. What you feel it was all about?
I think it was about my faith in myself. I think at that point in time, I'd made a decision to leave someone, which was after a long passage of time. So it was about a 10-year relationship. And we'd tried to be together and it didn't work. And lots of things had happened for me to get to the stage where my stuff was in storage. And I had to go somewhere, and I moved into this flat probably against my better judgment, because it belonged to a friend, and it was potentially an awkward situation. But I had nowhere else to go.
Yeah.
And I'd made a very brave decision, and I was literally, as I said, was in a limbo state at that point. And I remember walking around the area saying to myself at the time, I need a sign. I need a sign I've made the right, in my head, I need a sign I've made the right decision, as we all do, looking in the clouds, looking around for signage, anything like that. And I remember walking into a kind of boutique shop, and there was, it was a boutique shop with like dresses, beautiful stuff, boho type, beautiful dresses. And I remember, desperately trying to have a conversation with somebody. And I tried to have a chat in the deli, and nobody would talk to me. And I remember walking into this shop, and I'd said to this lady who was running the shop, who was a little bit more patient, I said, I've just moved into the area. And she was like, right, yes, dear. And I remember walking out these railway arches with all these converted shops. And I remember thinking, I still need a sign. I need a sign. Things are getting better. People are being a bit chatty. And I turned round, and the sign, the name of the shop was.
Right. Yeah. Lovely.
And I got my sign. Got my sign. And I was like, at that point, that was it. A light bulb went off. And I was like, I've made the right decision to come to this area. And I've made this right, it was reassurance for me.
Yeah.
I did wonder about the fact that these things were laughing and not mocking me, but they were being extremely cheeky. And it was, you're absolutely right. It's a vulnerability in a bathroom and an invasion in your own home of these little things. And that was again about exposure. Maybe that was about me, as I said, finding my voice. And I don't, there's this whole thing about don't talk about, the fae, or they don't like it. And I thought, today I'm actually saying this out loud to someone who's very much, used to talking about this.
Yeah.
But do they know do they, it's a fascinating conversation to have. Did they see me? They seem to not realize that I'd seen them at first. It's a fascinating point. It's about, what do we see? How do we see life, and what is this experience that we're going through that means we don't see these things every day? And it was about, I think it was about perception. It was about my own self-worth. It was about a lot of stuff at that point. And I think I was a bit like a computer, if you just pull the plug out of the wall and just leave it. That's what I was like at that point. There was a lot of, potential energy and static stuff that could go off, and things around that time were there. It was a very creative part of London. London's, got a lot going for it.
Yeah.
And it's thriving in many ways, but in many other ways, it's quite a lonely place, because it's a sort of place where if you're in a couple and you've got kids, and it's a great area. But if you're on your own, like I was, you're quite isolated.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And I, as I said, it's only now in the last sort of like year or 18 months that I found the ability to start talking about this experience, not to everybody, because I still think it's not a subject that people are comfortable with, but in the right direction, i.e. the direction of people who are already used to it. I think I'll probably find the answers.
Yeah. I do too. I think, part of this project is to put people in touch with each other. And I think there's somebody that I can put you in touch with, so that you could exchange experiences. Because I think that really helps as well. And I think that by entering, if you're feeling like studying, as I say, then go for it, because that just gives you the opportunity to explore as well. And, in terms of sort of talking about it, I think what tends to happen is that things are either sort of ridiculed, demonized, or infantilized. And in those ways, it's sort of, don't look at it's basically shutting people up, or shutting
absolutely
themes up, shutting themes down, topics of conversation. And so, everyone knows very well all you need to do, and you see this in the media a lot, is just to ridicule someone or something. And obviously they often do things. if ever talking about a sort of paranormal experience or a UFO event or whatever, then it's usually a sort of nudge, nudge, wink, wink.
Skywards looks.
Exactly. So yeah, all the demonizing as the church did, of course, back in the day.
Yeah.
Back in the, to demonize these experiences, or the kind of Victorian storybook, the sort of infantilizing of, which has its own quality as well. I mean, it is a beautiful world to step into. I grew up with beautiful storybooks with pictures of fairies and strange beings and things like that, with all the nursery rhyme characters and all the rest of it. And I love that. But that's not it. That's not all of it. It might be an aspect of it, but it's definitely not the full picture. This is the full picture. There are people that have really terrifying experiences. I've spoken to people before that have just found it very hard to talk about what they have gone through, and they are utterly terrified. And like you, they are, once they're out of that situation, or it's behind them in some way, they're frightened it will come back someday.
Yep.
And that talking about it might bring it back, and all the rest of it. And it and it doesn't, because I've spoken to people and that hasn't happened. But there is that real fear, just like any other traumatic experience that people have. So I really hear you. When you said that in the house you had heard voices, what did those voices, do you know what they said or what they sounded like?
It was disembodied voices, so it would be either a name repeated, or just like one word. There was I can't remember what it is, but I do distinctly, not like waking up hearing your name, because that has actually happened to me. That's very freaky when that happens, but it didn't happen in that house. When you wake up, I've had this happen where I've heard a little girl saying hello to me. That's quite disturbing. But it was just kind of either the name repeated or hearing your name being called in there. And it happened to other people. It was either visitors or people would stop coming round. And I was being very sociable at that point, because it was a nice part of town. I'd have people around. Oh yeah, and the other thing is the massive spiders. Oh my goodness.
Coming in from the garden.
But they seemed to like being in there. And I mean, they were monsters. I mean, real, like, not, they were people point where, two guys jumping onto the sofa, they were that big, trying to catch it. It was, it was just hilarious. It was just very funny. Whistles, we had whistles as well. Kind of just like the odd whistle, but mumbling. There was a bit of mumbling. I mean, it's not always the same thing. Odd smells. Oh my goodness, terrible smells as well. Like real death, like what on earth has died type smell.
God.
That was not good. Towards the end, that wasn't good either.
Goodness, it makes you wonder sort of if anything was, dare I say it, in the garden. Healing has helped me many times in my life when I'd reached a point where something needed to change. In 2005, I trained with Martin Brofman to learn the body mirror system of healing, which was life-changing for me. It's based on the idea that the parts of your body that don't work well reflect the parts of your life that don't work well, and about which you have tension in your consciousness. The understanding is that tension is stress, and stress causes symptoms. In a distance healing or in-person session, I move up the chakras, returning each one to wholeness using a colour map. During the process, I see images and situations, I hear words or receive impressions that tell me something about what caused the tension in that person's life. The feedback at the end of the session is a really big part of the healing. If you're interested in a chakra healing session, you can contact me at scarletofthefae@gmail.com.
I wondered too. It was a beautiful old building, but it had such a weird vibe about it. It was, I can't even explain it. You would understand as soon as you walked in there. You'd probably walk in and walk straight out. But visually, you wouldn't even think it. It was. So I do. That's another thing I would love to sort of look into is it a frequency or what is it that enables us to have those moments? I don't know. And why is it that we don't get to see it every day? I think that all of those things are very, and you know, has this shifted since the turn of the century? Because it seems to me there was a lot more paintings and way before the internet or the computer world was discovered, where people were actually painting these things. And there's less and less artwork of people doing that, even in the modern world. There's no fae anywhere. You know, you don't see it in a Damien Hirst.
Right. Yeah, I see what you're saying. I mean, you do, obviously, probably because of the world that I'm in, I do see a lot of fairy art. The thing is, it's the same with academia, though, unless you're talking about sort of theoretical stuff. And folklore itself rather than experiences, you know, there's no funding for that, is there? There's no funding.
I see what you mean. Yeah.
You know, who
doesn't sell,
obviously, but big artworks and exhibitions, they have sponsors. Do the sponsors want to put their money into actual, you know, fairies? They might see that as some kind of yesteryear type.
It's not contemporary enough.
They're not exactly. But then again, it's coming back. I mean, so Phelan McDermott, I don't know if you saw that recently.
No.
He did the theatre production of My Neighbour Totoro. And he's actually a fan of the podcast because he talked about it in the Observer. Talked about the podcast, which was pretty mind-blowing. So, you know, there are these little indications that maybe, you know, people are sort of interested in this again. But I think it's interesting that we are going in. This is like the latest industrial revolution, basically going into digital. And if you look back, the last time we had a huge surge of interest was in the industrial revolution as well, because you know the romantics were as a response to industrial revolution. At that time, the science, God overtook, you know, religion, and then you had this kind of backlash, if you like, against that with the romantics. So, you know, perhaps what we're experiencing now is something of the same. So what does that mean? Does that mean that we seek for it, or does it mean that they, between that kind of liminal space, between the sort of liminal bubbles, if you like, of perception, of going from one world and vibe into another, do they make themselves known or are more easily seen in those times, in times of great shift? So you can look at it, you know, from that perspective, the sort of macro, and then you can look at it on an individual level as well, that you know, you chose to step out of life, you could say that. And sometimes it's depending on what we feel is possible, we can make a shift. We could leave a relationship and we could go straight into the life that we always wanted, and you know, and that. But for a lot of people, that just seems impossible. And so there's this kind of stepping stone in between, and maybe I don't know, but you stepped into a kind of a liminal space in order to rearrange things, not just in your life, but on a spiritual level, emotional level, mental level, all of that, before you step out. It's a bit like Mr. Ben, sort of going into his magic, I've been watching this with my kid lately, you know, going in and having this experience and then coming out and stepping into something new, because now you're ready, because you've been through this, whatever it was that you decided, that your deep spirit within you decided to step into, in order to get to where you really want to be and what you really want to do. So just offering
that one
ideas. Just offering.
No, that's really, do you know what? And I did think this, in a way, it is a therapeutic thing, because you know, in order to experience something like this, you know, you do have to explore and ask these questions of yourself, because you are the only person who'd experienced it at that point to you. And yes, if I looked at it all and went, well, I'm not surprised this happened at this point, because I can't think of many stages in my life where I've been in that limbo-y type point. I think maybe when I finished university, that was another stage, but that was like a 21, 22, where you were leaving university and you hadn't really started in the real world.
Yeah.
This was a very rare point for me because obviously, as a grown up, we'd like to think that we're still working and functioning. And, I didn't have anybody in my life. I was freelancing, but I was also in a sort of strange setup with a company that wasn't in the UK. I had my stuff in storage. I was staying in somebody else's flat. All of these things, actually, now I look back, I think even when I see people conducting sort of paranormal experiments, they're doing it in quite often abandoned hospitals, abandoned hotels, abandoned prisons. Those spaces are they're liminal spaces. And anybody going into them is going to experience something because other things will move into it.
Yeah.
I mean, we could go on for hours debating on what these things are, but and where they are and how they come about. But I think that they live amongst us. I think we're just not seeing them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I do. I feel that they are around us, and I think I'm noticing myself a lot, but I'm also getting messages from other people that they are very much here, and for some reason in the last few, say 5 years, we're seeing them more and more. That we are able to sense their presence a lot more than we had previously been. So whether that's something about their world or our worlds merging,
interesting.
I don't know, but they're definitely a lot more phenomena, and yeah, we're interested. A lot of us are innately, we know that this is something that is real, and we are drawn towards it to explore that in greater numbers all the time.
It's interesting as well because I was, as an artist or as a designer, I was looking at doing some artwork, more to do with very similar to the little thing I drew for you, but probably not quite as evil. But and by doing that, I was on Pinterest and I was looking at otherworldly type images and the fae, and I was looking at these images, some of them which are AI, not all of them are, but some of them are digitally produced, shall we say, even if they're not AI themselves, someone's done it with a program. And I started to look at them going, yeah, other people have experienced this too, because it's a kind of greeny grey hazy feel with sparkles of light around these pictures. And I was like, yeah, I can feel that this otherworldly thing, it's where's it coming from? It's not people's fantasy stuff comes from an image somewhere. And I think maybe more of this will come through because it will become more acceptable by the AI art, because it's some of it. Go on.
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to say, I guess they find a way to come through, don't they? Whether it's through AI or whether it's through somebody. Find a way to exist. I don't know if you're familiar with Brett Manning's work.
No.
So,
is she the last lady you had on the podcast?
She was actually. Yes. Yeah, and her work is magnificent. And there are lots of other artists. I think there's Iris Complier. Is it Complier? I will link I will link to her work, because hers is another type of art that I really resonate with. But it's because, I mean, certainly for Brett, and I wonder if Brian Froud, I'm never sure how to pronounce his surname. It seems apparent that, well, for sure, Brett has had her experiences, and she is able to, connect with them and get a sense of what they look like. This is what they look like to her. And I'm sure Brian's work is, harks from similar experiences, but I don't know. But looking at his work, he seems to really just know what they look like, because they do look like that.
Yes. Yeah. It sounds a very strange thing to say, because I was just thinking that yesterday, as I said to you, it's like, oh, this is why they look right. This is why people are drawing them, because they've seen them. They look like that.
Yeah, they just look like that.
They just look like that, and it's not a fantasy. This is it's very, even the terminology sounds like I'm going cuckoo, but
Yeah.
I think only people who've seen them would understand what you and I are saying, which is they're just drawing what they are. They're not. This is not a made up thing. They're not just sticking on a cute. Why would you stick a wing on somebody? You know, why would you do this? You wouldn't. Otherwise, they'd all be human looking. They wouldn't have, sort of gossamer wings and pointy noses and big feet. They would look like us, and they don't completely. As I said, even talking about this, no, I don't. I think if I look at that whole flat and the whole experience I had in there, and it was 18 months of this. This wasn't just this particular incident I'm telling you about was one night, but the whole of the rest of it makes it very clear to me why it came to that point, because I think it was a troubled space. I'm not going to go into too many details, but there were other issues that had happened to people who'd been in there before. And I think over a passage of time, we all worked out that I think that it was a troubled space. I think that stuff had gone on there that was probably not cleared out. I think if someone went in there properly and cleared it all out, it would probably be a lovely space to be. Mm-hmm. But this is, as I said, I've been in London for over 20 years. Nothing like that has ever happened to me before. And, as I said, it probably won't be the last. Now I've acknowledged it. Maybe I will be more in tune to it. And it would be lovely to experience something again. I would certainly not turn my back to it at all. I don't want to meet those again.
No.
But they were living with me. They were around, and I don't think that was a figment of my imagination, because so many other people were noticing stuff as well. It's not, it's at some point somebody somewhere, and it's very strange because I had a mobile phone in the bathroom with me at the time, and people would have said, "Oh, why didn't you take a photograph?" Impossible. It was too fast, too speedy. They would have, gosh, it would have been wonderful, but I don't know whether a phone would even capture that.
No.
I just no.
In that moment, you're trying to figure out what it is that you're looking at. Your
Mm-hmm.
brain is sort of processing.
Yeah.
And then, in some moments you either sort of blink or look away or whatever, or in your case you gasped and they disappeared. In my case, I think it was me that either blinked or, well, I can never know.
Looked away,
you don't do the things that you think you would. And like you say, it's too by the time you reached for your phone in your bag, if you were out or whatever, it's the moment's gone. And as you say, I believe, and I don't hold all the answers, but I don't hold any answers, to be honest. But I feel, and this is my feeling, and this may change over time, that we are seeing them, with our third eye. We are seeing we are seeing with another vision that we have that is very real. We've got our eyes open and we're seeing something, and it is very real, and it's right there. Where it's not something that can be captured by a photo lens. It's something within us that we see through it's another level of awareness and sense that we have, which is why I don't think we can capture on film, but I do think we can capture their essence. So, sometimes, so things like orbs, I do believe that can be indication, because it's just their sort of energy, those beings manifesting as energy is what I'm trying to say. So I do think we can sometimes see orbs in pictures when it's not dust and all the rest of it. I do understand sometimes it's just dust, but in a lot of cases it's not, and that you do get these orbs in places where these beings appear.
Yes,
you see the orbs with the naked eye as well.
Yes.
So,
yes.
But then again, it's it's not really about collecting evidence for people. I think what the most important thing is, as you say, making sense of it for yourself and owning the experience. And and I've said this before, even when they are really frightening experiences, there's something to be learned. There's something really potent and powerful about these encounters, even when they have been traumatic.
Yeah, it was traumatic. Why was it traumatic for me? they felt and looked scary. And they were greeny grey, like avocado skinned. And it was such a shock to be being observed like this. All of these things sort of like add up, but also I did feel very invaded, and I didn't know what to do with it. I just like speechless. I mean, I'd never experienced anything like it in my life. And as I said, Googling and looking for it, not many people were A, prepared to talk about it, or B, there wasn't much out there. This was a few years back. And I was just like, I just sort of buried it. And I do think, as I said, it is great speaking about this and therapy to an extent. And I think perhaps it hasn't completely unraveled yet. The experience itself was very unique, and I'm lucky I can draw. I'm lucky I have come from that sort of creative world where I can actually bring that to life. And even by trying to do that, I wish I had tools to bring them both to light, and maybe by doing some more exploration into kind of more maybe digital programs, maybe that will be an easier way of doing it, because maybe a static picture isn't enough, because they were moving.
That's quite a big step, I imagine.
It is a big step, massive step for me.
It sounds like maybe you would like to communicate with them in some way again.
Yeah, I think there's a connection. There's definitely a connection there, because we were in this together, as it were.
On your terms this time.
Yeah, on my terms this time. That would be really interesting. I mean, yes, and I know that you've got someone that that does the tea ceremony, the Fae.
Oh, he's amazing, Todd. Yeah, I mean, I say on our terms. We just can't. It's fairies are a law unto themselves, aren't they?
Yeah.
But I think that what I mean by that is that we can intend, right, okay, I'm going to set some boundaries here. I would like to communicate with you in this way. You do not come into my home. You do not try and, scare my kids, or whatever those boundaries are, and being very clear about it. And you can kind of communicate and build up some sort of relationship, and also then sort of paying attention to when you should really be getting out of there and backing off and not trying to communicate. But I don't know, there's something about these beings that would, that sounds like you'd be more inclined to speak to them than, say, perhaps some really nasty, sort of vicious goblins that I have heard about. But that's your journey to decide upon. But yeah, Todd is great. We've held a couple of sessions in the past, and we're just about to do one this Saturday. Yeah, so jump in if you want to.
Might jump in.
It's at 9:30, so it's 9:30 till 10:30.
Okay.
And so if you do, then I will send you some info to tell you which teas to get, because he provides some information on the different teas that you can use. There's a fairy tea, there's a water sprite tea. We actually do the ritual in the workshop. And then he talks to you about your experiences, and it's quite powerful actually, because the guy that we did one on Saturday night, and this guy came along, and a bit like me the first time, I was like, oh, this is interesting, let's see what this is. And then when I tried the tea, honestly, I felt this being come in on my left hand side, and it was the same. Someone else had a similar experience to me in that first tea ceremony, and then on Saturday night this guy had something similar. He was like, oh well, I did not expect that to happen, I'm interested in this kind of thing. I didn't actually expect to feel the presence of fairies. And he said I'm quite actually mind blown at the moment. He was really quite taken aback. So yeah, he's one of these people that's just had so many experiences in his life, so I just love talking to him about what he's experiencing at the moment. And so yeah, he's always great to chat to.
Well, I was thinking about it a lot, and I was thinking maybe this is I've done a lot of sort of thinking about this, listened to your podcast and a lot of research. Some time has gone past since this experience, and it might be a way of dealing with it. And also, not in a dramatic type way, but also building, another layer of actually saying, okay, this was a shock, but it's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
And when you were saying about contacting them again and connecting with them, is there another way of doing that? Because that's another thing that I have keep asking myself, how did I manage to do that? I wasn't, there was no ritual involved. I wasn't intending to do anything. They caught me out. So, and I caught myself out. I was not prepared for that at all. And I think that's what happens with, even with paranormal experiences. You could go in and go ghost hunting till you're blue in the face, but it'll be on a Tuesday morning at 11 o'clock that someone sees Mrs. Whoever walk through the wall.
I know. I think, well, in the situation you were in, it sounds like everything aligned.
Yeah.
And as I say, there are no coincidences. So at some deep level, you were kind of looking for that experience, but it's not something that you can replicate because it doesn't come from our solar plexus where we go, this is what I want to do. And like you say, and I want it to happen this way and I want it to happen then. But what you can do is light a candle, draw a circle of protection around yourself, and there are lots of different ways of doing that. And I would call upon some deity of protection that you resonate with, and that could be going back to your Welsh heritage. You could decide that there's something or someone that you want to call upon, or people use saints, people use because they are also powerful beings and their energy is very powerful. Or you could look at archangels or whatever feels right to you. And what you could even do, because you're an artist, is you could draw your protector. You could just kind of do something very intuitively and draw a picture of a being that will be your protector and have them in your circle alongside, you can give them a name. And you could, once you feel 100% that you feel protected and that you are open to this, don't do it if you've had a bit of a dodgy
edgy
week,
day,
or you're feeling under par, or you have reservations about it. You want to be
on an even keel,
fully, and then you could just offer out, I'd like to understand more about this, who were you, who are you, and what did you want, and just start writing and see what comes back. But it's all about sort of setting up your circle and protecting yourself first of all before you go entering into anything really, and set out from the beginning what your intention is and what your boundaries are. As I say, I am opening to this experience in this space and I call upon, such and such as my protector, and I state that only good shall enter therein, and I'm calling upon the knowledge, the source of all, to aid me with my queries in this regard, so that you're not inviting them back into your space again, but you are looking for answers, and just trust and see where that journey goes. And it might be something that you do over a matter of months. You might start at a base level and go on. If you said that your grandmother had a crystal ball, I don't know where it is now, but maybe you could enlist that, or if she had a personal belonging.
I do have quite a lot of her stuff here,
Right.
I don't have the crystal ball, but I could find something.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is what I do. If there are loved ones that are no longer with us that can aid you in this, and it sounds like she might be very well placed to do this, then have something of hers with you, and beforehand, call upon her. In fact, she could be your protector or one of your protectors. You don't just have to have one, you can have several. So, that's very powerful, because although people leave this plane, they never really go, and they're always with us. And so if you have that love connection, close relationship with somebody that's been in your life, they are right by your side if you ask them to be. So, that's just something that you could look to do as well, and just kind of trust where it goes really, and just explore it, experiment with it.
Well, I think that's extremely helpful, and the conversation that we had today, there are many, many questions and things I've already sort of like asked myself, but it was a kind of where, yeah, you know, why did this happen and all those kind of things. I think this is really helpful to kind of process it for me, because what now I've kind of spoken about it, and yes, it was shocking and all the rest of it, but it's what to do with it and what does it mean for me, because it was a kind of snapshot of in time, which is so unique that it is kind of life-changing in a way. It is in a way, but not in the profound way that people are prepared to talk about. So this is, you know, it's a very private thing, but I think communicating and taking it to another stage is a very therapeutic thing to say and do. And it's helped me massively just talking about this with you, because I knew as well that you are obviously very well rehearsed with it and you've heard many, many people's versions. You know, as I said, I haven't told many people at all. And it still makes me, even this morning, I was feeling quite nervous because I was just thinking, oh God, you know, what is going to come from this? Not from you, but what am I doing? You know, what am I doing? And I think that's what we are all left with, is a sort of slightly sort of a sense of helplessness. And bewilderment, which is actually, it's a little bit like having going through PTSD. You're in that state of shock, and even I think it was great actually drawing this little goblin, because it meant I had to go back into that room and see that vision again, and say to myself, you know, this did happen. You know, this actually was enough for you to, you know, start Googling these things and fling all the lights on. That is certainly not something I didn't have, you know, I'd certainly not, as I said, Dungeons and Dragons person, or this image, that the image of the two of them together is something I've never seen before. It was just like, what? Yeah. And the fact that it happened in London. I think this is it. It wasn't at a, you know, the beautiful space that you've just showed me in Guernsey, Jersey, or whatever it is. It's not a sort of traditional place where people have spotted things. It was actually to go, oh my goodness, they live amongst us.
It's funny because I was at a gathering online recently. I gave a talk, and then afterwards somebody said, do you ever get people talking to you about fairies in cities? And there weren't many that I could talk about, actually. So you're right that they don't always happen in cities, but a lot of them do, and maybe there's more than we
realise.
More to come out.
Well, this was more further out as well. I mean, I don't know if it's maybe they don't like being, you know, right into the centre of London where it's all hustle and bustle. I can't imagine they do. But I don't know the world that they're in. You know, why would they find it more appealing to be out there? Maybe because they're more undisturbed. I don't know. You know, there's all these questions that you know, maybe I am supposed to find the answers to. Maybe, you know, and I did start to think, gosh, am I actually genuinely seeing things, or do they exist? But apparently they do in England and Scotland and Wales, and people do see them. Had it been, you know, on a ferry on the Isle of Wight, I might have been a bit more skeptical. But you know, I don't know the world that they're in. I mean, they obviously were in what I perceive as my world. How they see these enormous buildings, I don't know. But the fact that, you know, when I was Googling and these poor little girls were saying, oh, I saw these coming down the wall through my window at night. How frightening that must have been.
Yeah, I know. Can you imagine if you went down to your parents then and told them and they just didn't believe you, which of course happens a lot. It's, parents, it's not the parents' fault either, because it's just not something that we're used to, and we do need to talk about it more. We do. I hope we get to.
I hope we get to too. And you know, this is as I said, it's a really helpful thing to me, because now you know, even telling you about the orbs and stuff, you know, other things make sense within that flat. Now it wasn't just that flash of seeing them; it was a kind of realization of, oh, this is one big thing going on here. This is not one big thing, but this is a pool of stuff that's actually happening to me within, or happening with me within this building. And I'm not just seeing a quick snapshot. That was you're absolutely right. It was that moment, the moonlight, the alignment in the middle of the night, and being awake enough. I mean, I was awake enough to, I wasn't in a dream. I remember that night very well, and I don't know why. It was a real awareness.
But you hadn't sort of quite clicked into day energy, nighttime, everything sort of settles. And when we've just woken up, we're sort of we're still in sort of a semi-dream state, aren't we?
Yeah.
So, that there's that. It's really interesting though.
Time to
For me, this part of the conversation was a delight to listen back to. We often wonder when we've experienced things that aren't well understood. What has led me to this point? Why me? What is going on? We've all had a taste of that sense of inner questing over the last 3 years. We know what it's like to step into a situation that we certainly weren't expecting, yet feel moved to work through it because we recognise it's part of our unique adventure in this lifetime. Hopefully we recognise that. For our guest, the encounter had felt strangely familiar. Although she felt invaded, and that was a huge process to work through, which is still ongoing, she simultaneously recognised that she would perhaps like to connect with them again, given the right circumstances. The advice I gave for connecting with these beings is very open, but what I would stress is the importance to trust your own instinct on this, and do not cross any boundaries or make any communications unless you feel absolutely sure that it feels right to you, and always seek advice from a trusted source if you feel unsure. If you get a sense that it's not safe, step away. Do not even try and communicate. And if you are very new to these ideas, then again, join a group where you can trust the people in that group. There's often pub moots and other kinds of spiritual groups and workshops. Please do join one where the bunch of people or the leader of that group really know what they're doing. If you get a sense that it's all about their ego, back away. I've been very lucky in my life that I have always found really amazing teachers and mentors. That's not to say that I haven't come across situations where I've gone into a place or workshop and just felt like it wasn't really being run for the right reasons. Go with your instinct, trust it. Your body will tell you, your sense of awareness will tell you. It should feel right. However, if you do start to build a way of connecting with these worlds, whilst ensuring that you keep grounded in this world, you can re-establish that sense of wonder that we discussed. Messages and ideas may come in metaphors, dreams, visions, and all manner of creative methods. Set yourself free to explore the sorts of creative outlets that you enjoyed as a child, if you have distanced yourself from them as an adult. This is your natural way of being in this world. It feels like more people are recognising this and making time for those pursuits. It's so important for well-being, particularly at this time. It also occurred to me after the last episode that our guest rising in the night to use the loo provides a potential hypnopompic aspect to the event. I know myself if I've woken from a dream and had to head to the loo during the night. Sometimes you're still heavy with sleep and not quite awake. The state is called hypnopompia, relating to the Greek words hypnos, meaning sleep, and pompe, meaning ascending away. So, ascending away sleep. We may gain access to the unconscious mind during these times as we're not fully integrated in the material world, but hovering at an etheric level where we can access enlightening information and visions. Visionaries such as Salvador Dali, Mary Shelley and Thomas Edison enlisted those states for inspiration by holding objects in their hands while relaxing as they went off to sleep. When their hands became limp as they fell into a sleep state, the object's falling, clattering noise would arouse them. That altered state allowed them to access ideas and visions from deep within their consciousness. Now, our guest experienced these beings fully. And yet it could have been the close proximity to dream state which enabled her to see through the material blocks that are a feature of our usual daily lives. It begs the question yet again, are beings from these other worlds around us all the time, but whilst we're increasingly aware of them, for the most part we just don't see them? Thank you so much for listening to the end. Have you experimented with hypnagogic states, or do you have experiences of connecting with fairy beings? I would love to hear about them, and as you are here near the end, I think you would enjoy the Patreon group too, so do consider joining us and getting involved in the discussion there. I don't know about you, but I'm finding it increasingly more difficult to resonate with the old world as we've known it during our lives so far. It feels heavy and strange, and I speak to young people that are finding it frightening to witness. Their sense is that they've come of age and inherited a world that they see as self-destructing. Well, the thing is, yes, it is falling, but it's meant to. When I attended spiritual groups all those years ago in the late 1990s, we were taught that we'd see these systems fall within our own lifetime. Governmental systems, education, health, law. At that time, I just couldn't imagine what it would be like to witness that. But here we are, and the time is right. That old ego-ridden world has tied itself up in knots. It needs to go. Something new is building, and young people are at the helm in building that. Perhaps you have a specific job that you've come here to do which relates to the construction of that new world. If you watch the news, it might paint a picture of disaster, but ask yourself, from whose perspective? It's unthinkable for many to let go of power and dominance. I choose to see it as a necessary step to move into where we really want to be, so find other like-minded souls and do what you love doing best. We're walking forward into a new world that we're creating with each other. Keep that as your focus. Maintain a sense of limitless possibility and that sense of wonder that we arrived in this world with, and always remain curious.